Cleetus McFarland just had the kind of Berlin Raceway debut that could shift the entire conversation around his move into late model racing. He came to Michigan for one of the biggest short-track races of the year, lined up against some of the best names in pavement racing, with thousands of fans in the stands watching every single lap. But as the race wound down, things took a difficult turn. Cleetus ended up making contact with another car, and his night came to an early end with serious damage to his machine. The wild part is that this all happened while the race leader was closing in to put him a lap down. So how did Cleetus go from simply trying to survive his first super late model start to ending the night with a torn-up race car? And what does this actually mean for his next event at the same track just days later? Stick around, because this story is far from over, and there's a lot more going on here than just one bad ending. Before any of that happened, Cleetus already had a serious challenge sitting in front of him. The Tecton 250 at Berlin Raceway was a 250-lap event paying $40,000 to the winner, and the field was loaded with legitimate short-track talent from all over the country. This wasn't just another weekend late-model race that gets forgotten by Monday. Carson Hocevar was there. Majeski was there. Bubba Pollard was there. Evan Shotko was there. Tristan McKee was there. Nearly every serious contender in short-track pavement racing showed up for this one, and Cleetus was stepping into all of it for his very first super late model start. Even before the green flag dropped, the buzz around Cleetus's appearance at Berlin was massive. Carson Hocevar and Eric Jones had already spoken publicly about the kind of attention Cleetus brings to short-track racing, with Jones calling the impact astronomical when talking about the crowds and energy that follow him wherever he races. That kind of comment from established Cup Series names says a lot about how much weight Cleetus's crossover into late models actually carries. This wasn't a quiet grassroots weekend. It was a genuine event, and the eyes on him were real. Cleetus's night actually started with a bit of promise. In the first practice session, he showed legitimate speed, posting the 13th fastest time out of 27 cars in the field. His lap put him ahead of several drivers who have far more experience at this level of competition, and for someone making his first ever super late model start at a track as demanding as Berlin, that was a genuinely respectable opening. It suggested he wasn't just there for the spectacle. He was actually capable of running competitively against this group. Qualifying told a different story, though. Cleetus turned a lap that put him 22nd in the field, meaning he had a long way to go if he wanted to work his way toward the front over the course of a 250-lap race. That's a tall order at a track like Berlin, which is barely 4/10 of a mile around. Everything happens fast there. Traffic, tire wear, and the margin for error are all compressed into a tiny, high-speed racetrack where a single mistake can cost multiple positions in seconds. Starting 22nd meant Cleetus would spend a huge portion of the race simply navigating lapped cars and faster, more experienced competitors around him, all while trying to learn a completely different style of racing than what he's used to. For most of the race, Cleetus did exactly what a driver in his position needed to do. He managed the car, worked through traffic carefully, and stayed patient instead of forcing anything early. He wasn't fighting for the win, and nobody realistically expected him to be. But he was putting in consistent laps and gaining real experience against a field that included some of the best short trackers in the country. That's the kind of seat time that simply can't be replicated anywhere else, and by all accounts, he was holding his own deep into the race. Then, late in the event, things changed quickly. Race leader Evan Shotko was closing in on Cleetus to put him a lap down, and in the middle of that situation, Cleetus lost the back of the car in turn 3. The car came around, and contact was made with another competitor's machine in the process. Both cars sustained damage, and for Cleetus, that was effectively the end of his night. It wasn't the finish anyone wanted, especially given how much attention was on this debut, but it's also the kind of moment that happens when a driver with limited late model experience is dropped into a stacked 250-lap field against professionals who do this every week. What made the situation tougher is the timing of it all. Being approached by the leader adds pressure at any track, but at somewhere as small and fast as Berlin, it leaves very little room to adjust. A driver in that spot has to hold a predictable line so the leader can pass cleanly, while also still managing his own tires, his own line through traffic, and everything else happening on a crowded racetrack. Cleetus simply lost the rear of the car in that exact moment, and once it started to rotate, there wasn't much time left to recover. That's short-track racing at this level. Things happen in a split second, and even experienced drivers get caught out by situations like this. Officially, Cleetus was classified 19th out of 27 cars. He started 22nd, completed more than 230 laps, and was still running late into the race before the contact ended his night. That's genuinely worth pointing out, because a lot of people are going to see the words crash and damaged race car in a headline and assume the entire night was a disaster from start to finish. In reality, he ran the vast majority of a grueling 250-lap race against one of the toughest fields in short track racing before things finally went wrong. That's a very different story than simply wrecking out early or struggling the whole way through. While Cleetus's race was winding down in those closing stages, the battle for the actual win was heating up into one of the best of the entire event. Evan Shotko, who had led a large chunk of the race and looked like the class of the field for long stretches, ran into trouble of his own. He appeared to suffer a right front issue that sent him hard into the turn 3 wall, taking him out of contention almost instantly and completely reshuffling the finishing order. One moment he looked like the favorite to win, and the next he was out of the race entirely. That's how quickly things can turn at Berlin. With Shotko out of the picture, Bubba Pollard moved into the lead, with Tristan McKee right on his bumper fighting hard for the win. Pollard is one of the most respected names in super late model racing anywhere in the country, a veteran with a long list of major wins to his name. McKee, on the other hand, has been building a reputation as one of the sport's rising young stars, someone a lot of short track fans have had their eye on for a while now. The two of them went door-to-door in the closing laps in what turned into a genuine classic finish. Pollard appeared to bobble slightly entering turn 3, and Tristan McKee capitalized immediately, taking the checkered flag for his first-ever Tecton 250 victory at Berlin Raceway. Pollard settled for second after being right there for the win in the final laps. Carson Hocevar came home third, showing once again why he's become one of the most talked-about names in short track and Cup Series racing alike. Majeski finished fourth, and the top 5 was rounded out from there. It was a huge night for McKee, a career-defining kind of win, and a heartbreaking near-miss for Pollard, who did everything right except for that one small mistake in the final laps. That context matters when you look at Cleetus's 19th place result. Was it the debut he wanted? Obviously not. Nobody wants their first major super late model start to end with damage to the car before they even get to see the checkered flag. But this also isn't the end of the story, not even close. It's easy to look at one result in isolation and draw big conclusions, but that's not really how development works in any form of racing. Cleetus is still very early in his late model journey. He's building experience at a level that represents a significant step up in competition compared to what he's used to, and nights like this one are simply part of that process. Every driver who has ever moved into a new discipline has gone through nights exactly like this. What matters most now is what comes next, because Cleetus isn't leaving Berlin behind after just one race. He's actually scheduled to be back at the same track for his own event on August 15th, just 3 days after this result. That changes everything about how this story plays out from here. Instead of having weeks to review the data, rebuild, and mentally reset, the turnaround for Cleetus and his team is almost immediate. They now have to assess the damage from this crash, get the car repaired and ready to go, and figure out exactly what lessons Cleetus can actually take from this experience before he's back out on that same racetrack. There's no long off-season to fall back on here. Whatever gets learned from this Tecton 250 has to be applied almost right away. And honestly, that's the most interesting part of this whole situation. The late race incident is going to dominate the headlines and the social media conversation, but the real story is how Cleetus responds to it. Does he come back more conservative through the corners next time out? Can he qualify closer to the front of the field with a bit more knowledge of how the car handles at Berlin? Can he manage traffic and lapped cars more comfortably now that he's had a real 250-lap race under his belt? Berlin gave him a very real, very public lesson. At this level of competition, raw speed is only part of the equation. Consistency, traffic awareness, and keeping the car under control when things are happening fast around you matter just as much, if not more. Cleetus didn't get the clean debut he was hoping for, and he certainly didn't get to see that checkered flag fly for him. But he did get through a major step in his late model development, running competitively for the better part of 230 laps against one of the toughest fields in the sport. Now the attention shifts entirely to what he does with that experience. After a 19th place finish and a race car that needs real repair work before it can hit the track again, Cleetus McFarland doesn't have much time to sit around and think about what went wrong. His next Berlin opportunity is already right around the corner, and it's coming fast. If he comes back sharper for it, more patient in traffic and more comfortable with how the car behaves in that final stretch of a long run, this rough debut might end up being remembered as exactly the kind of race where he learned one of the most important lessons of his entire late model career so far. Sometimes the roughest nights end up mattering the most down the road. So what do you think? Was this just part of the normal learning curve for a driver stepping into a brand new discipline? Or does this result show that Cleetus still has real work to do before he can consistently run with the top super late model drivers in the country? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below, because this is exactly the kind of debate the short track community loves to have. If you want to stay caught up on everything happening across NASCAR and the short track world, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to NASCAR Race News, because after this result at Berlin, his very next race in just a few days could end up being one of the biggest storylines of the entire week.